What happens when Hollywood's most bankable star faces off with morning TV's most unflinching interviewer? The result: pure chaos, raw tension, and one of the most unforgettable live interviews ever aired. Hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because this story spirals fast. The Good Morning America studio buzzed with its usual pre-show energy. Cameras adjusted, makeup brushes danced, producers darted across the floor. But today, the air crackled with something different, sharp, electric, and unpredictable. At the desk sat George Stephanopoulos, his expression tight with focus. His team knew that look, the shark circling look. It meant he smelled a story, not a segment. Brad Pitt arrived right on schedule, immaculate in a navy suit, his easy smile lighting up the room. The crew relaxed instantly, until they caught the glint in George's eyes as he watched the monitor. "Remember," George told his producer Sarah as she clipped on his mic, "no fluff today, no cozy promo chatter. I want truth." Sarah hesitated. "George, this is morning television, not 60 Minutes. He smirked. "Professional doesn't mean dull. Pitt's expecting a charm session. He's about to get a reality check." Meanwhile, in the green room, Brad and his publicist Jennifer ran through their usual pre-show script. Keep it light, keep it safe, deflect the personal stuff with grace. George can be intense, Jennifer warned, dabbing powder on his face. Brad laughed easily. "Please, I've handled tougher interviews. Remember that British guy who ambushed me about the divorce? I'll be fine." "Mr. Pitt, we're ready for you," called the stage manager. As Brad stepped into the bright lights, applause thundered. He waved, flashed that legendary smile, and took his seat opposite George. From the wings, Jennifer noticed the flicker in George's eyes. Predatory calm. "Back in 30 seconds!" someone shouted. George leaned forward, voice low. "Hope you're ready for a real conversation today, Brad." No promotional fluff. Brad's smile didn't fade, but the muscles at his jaw tightened. "Always ready, George. Real makes good TV, doesn't it?" The red light blinked on. "Welcome back to Good Morning America. I'm joined by Academy Award winner Brad Pitt, whose new film is smashing box office records." George's TV grin was flawless, but beneath it the shark was circling. "Brad, thanks for being here. Pleasure as always. George." "Let's start with something simple," George began smoothly. "Your new film explores redemption and second chances. Given your own very public journey, how much of you is in this role?" The question hit like a punch. This wasn't about cinema anymore. It was personal. Brad's instincts kicked in. "Well, every actor draws from experience," he said evenly. "But it's fiction. Audiences connect with the story. Not my life." George didn't blink. "But surely the parallels aren't coincidence. A man trying to rebuild his image, reconnect with his family, prove he's changed. That's more than performance, isn't it?" The studio fell silent. Even the hum of the lights seemed to fade. Brad's jaw flexed. "I think you're reading too much into it, George. It's a story. I'm just the guy telling it." George leaned closer, eyes locked. "Your fans aren't naive. They see the connections. The question is, do you have the courage to admit them?" Brad's eyes hardened. "Courage?" His tone dropped, the easy charm gone. "I've got plenty of courage, George," Brad said evenly, his tone steely now. "What I don't have is an obligation to turn every interview into a therapy session for your entertainment." The studio tensed. Camera operators traded uneasy glances. In the control room, the director frantically gestured for George to back off. But George was locked in. The scent of conflict had him hooked. "No one's asking for therapy," George countered coolly. "But when you're promoting a film about accountability and redemption, isn't it fair to ask if you've actually learned anything from your own mistakes?" Brad's composure faltered. "What mistakes are you referring to exactly?" George's smile sharpened. Well, we could start with your marriage, the custody battle, the allegations. Do you think you handled any of that with the same maturity you're portraying on screen? The words landed like a bomb. In the wings, Brad's publicist made frantic hand gestures to cut the feed. But George didn't look away. His focus was predatory, relentless. Brad's eyes darkened, the Hollywood charm fading fast. I think we need to redirect this conversation back to why I'm here. The film. But George wasn't done. The film is about a man confronting his past mistakes. So let's be direct. Do you believe you handled your divorce and custody situation with that same maturity? My personal life? Brad said tightly, is not up for discussion on Good Morning America. If you want to talk about acting, I'm here. But we're not doing this. George's expression turned cold. But Brad, you've built your entire career on your public image. You can't have it both ways. You can't sell tickets on fame, then claim privacy when the truth gets uncomfortable. Brad gave a short, humorless laugh. Uncomfortable? George, I've done interviews longer than some of your staff have been alive. This isn't about comfort. It's about basic professional respect, something you seem to have forgotten. Chaos rippled through the control room. Directors shouted into headsets, but George had already yanked out his earpiece. Network executives were on the phone upstairs. This was no longer an interview. It was a live implosion. Professional respect? George's voice rose slightly. Is that what you call refusing to answer legitimate questions about your behavior? About how your actions impacted your children? Brad froze. That was the line. The one he'd prayed George wouldn't cross. His voice dropped to a near whisper. You just crossed a line you can't uncross, George. My kids are off limits, period. George leaned forward. Your kids weren't off limits when you made choices that affected them, were they? The custody hearings, the therapy sessions, all public record. Don't the viewers have a right to understand the man behind the movie star? Brad stood abruptly. His mic pack hit the floor with a sharp crack that echoed through the silent studio. The audience gasped. Sit down, Brad, George ordered, his tone commanding. We're in the middle of an interview. No, Brad said, his voice carrying across the room. We're in the middle of an ambush. You invited me here to talk about my work, and instead you're trying to play armchair psychologist on live television. George remained seated, eerily composed. I invited you here for an honest conversation, something your publicists clearly didn't prepare you for. Brad gave a sharp, bitter laugh. Honest? This isn't honesty, George. This is exploitation. You're not chasing truth. You're chasing ratings. Trying to make yourself relevant by tearing down someone else. The studio was dead silent. The audience didn't dare move. Cameras kept rolling. Operators frozen in disbelief. I've already made my name, Brad, George said icily. I've interviewed presidents, prime ministers, world leaders. I don't need to tear anyone down, but I don't coddle celebrities who think fame makes them untouchable. Untouchable? Brad shot back, his voice rising. This isn't about fame. This is about decency. There are lines you don't cross, especially when it comes to children. George stood at last, face to face with him. Your children are part of the story because you made them part of it. Every headline, every filing, every public statement. That was your choice. Don't blame me for asking the questions everyone else is thinking, George said, voice taut with self-righteous conviction. Everyone else? Brad shot back, anger building to a dangerous edge. You mean your producers? Your network execs counting ratings while you exploit my family for views? Those are the people whose thoughts you're worried about? The room felt smaller now. Not a studio, but a battleground. What began as an interview had spiraled into a philosophical showdown over fame, privacy, and the ethics of modern media. Every camera kept rolling, capturing each word, each flicker of emotion, each unraveling second. I'm worried about giving viewers honesty, George said evenly. They deserve more than polished PR sound bites. They deserve to see who you really are beneath the Hollywood act. Who I really am. Brad's composure finally broke. Who I really am is a father trying to protect his kids from exactly this circus. Who I really am is someone who came here in good faith to talk about my work. Not to endure a public character assassination disguised as journalism. George pounced. Character assassination or character examination? There's a difference, Brad. The fact that you can't tell which one this is says everything about where your head's at right now. That was the moment the mask fully dropped. George wasn't just probing, he was provoking. A psychological duel was underway, and he was pressing for collapse. Brad's publicist had stopped signaling from the sidelines. She was now on her phone, speaking urgently. Lawyers, executives, damage control in real time. The stage manager hovered, uncertain, clearly under orders to not interrupt what had become a live television disaster. "You want to examine my character?" Brad said, voice low and deadly calm. "Fine, let's examine yours. What kind of character ambushes a guest? What kind of man drags children into a rating stunt? What kind of journalist hides behind integrity while practicing sophisticated bullying?" For the first time, George hesitated. He'd expected Brad to crumble or storm off, not fight back with quiet. "Surgical precision. I'm asking the questions that need to be asked," George replied, though his tone had lost some of its fire. "No," Brad said firmly. "You're asking the questions that get clicks. The ones that trend, that go viral. There's a canyon between journalism and exploitation, and you've sprinted right over the edge." The air was thick with pressure. Everyone felt the explosion coming, and then George detonated it. "You talk about exploitation, Brad," he said softly, almost smug. "But isn't that exactly what you've done to your own family? Used them for your image, your career, your redemption arc?" The blow landed hard. Brad's face drained, then flushed scarlet with rage. The practiced calm of decades in the spotlight disintegrated in an instant. "How dare you?" he whispered. The quiet was more dangerous than shouting. "How dare you sit there and lecture me about my family?" George leaned forward, smelling victory. "I'm not lecturing. I'm asking you to take accountability. Your ex-wife, your kids. They've all paid the price for your choices. When do you start owning that, instead of hiding behind your publicists and lawyers?" That was it, the final spark. Brad stepped toward the desk, fury radiating off him. "You want accountability? Here it is." His voice rose, sharp as a blade. "You're a failed political correspondent who couldn't hack it in real journalism. So now you ambush actors to feel relevant again." The words hit their target. George's mask cracked. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Brad shot back. "Gone was the movie star diplomacy. You sit here pretending to be some fearless truth-teller, but you're just a morning show performer, clinging to whatever credibility you think you had 20 years ago." George stood abruptly, face flushed with anger. "I've interviewed presidents, world leaders. I've covered wars, elections, constitutional crises. Don't you dare question my credentials." "Then act like it," Brad roared. "Stop behaving like a tabloid hack who lucked into a network contract. You want to be a serious journalist? Then ask serious questions. Don't pretend you're serving the truth when you're just feeding the gossip machine." The studio fell utterly silent. No one breathed. No one blinked. The cameras kept rolling, capturing the exact moment morning television crossed into history. What followed was a total breakdown of normal television protocol. Camera operators kept filming, though several looked uneasy with what they were capturing. This had gone far beyond entertainment. It was raw, personal, and unsettling. You think memorizing lines and looking good on screen makes you understand the real world. George's voice was rising, his composure slipping. "You live in a bubble of yes-men and sycophants. You wouldn't recognize accountability if it stared you in the face." Brad let out a sharp laugh. "Accountability? Let's talk about yours. How many careers have you destroyed with your ambush tactics? How many people have you humiliated just to feel relevant? When's the last time you looked in the mirror and realized you've become everything you once claimed to despise? The exchange had become brutal. Both men were now out for blood, each word sharpened to cut deep. At least I'm not hiding behind fame while my family falls apart. George snapped. Brad stepped closer to the desk, his tone low and dangerous. You've spent so long pretending to be the smartest guy in the room that you've forgotten how to be decent. You've mistaken cruelty for intelligence and ego for integrity. George's voice shook with rage. And you think pretending to be other people for a living makes your opinions matter? You're an entertainer, Brad. Nothing more. The tension in the studio was unbearable. Security was starting to move, sensing that the argument was seconds away from boiling over. You know what? Brad said quietly. This interview is over. You don't get to decide that. George shot back. You signed the contract. You don't just walk away because you don't like the truth. Brad turned to leave, but George's next word stopped him cold. Go ahead, walk away. Just like you walked away from your marriage, from your kids, from every hard thing in your life. Brad spun around, his face a mask of fury. You just made the biggest mistake of your career. Security moved in. George tried to hold his ground, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Is that a threat? It's a promise, Brad said, deadly calm. You just ended your own career on live television. He gestured to the cameras. Every word, every second, broadcast to millions. You attacked my family for ratings. Let's see how that plays online. The control room was in chaos. Finally, the stage manager rushed forward. We need to cut to commercial. No, George said through gritted teeth. We're finishing this. The interview is finished, Brad replied. He turned to face the main camera, his voice steady. Ladies and gentlemen, I came here to talk about a film about redemption. Instead, I was ambushed under the guise of journalism. This, what you just saw, is what's wrong with media today. He unclipped his mic and let it drop to the floor. George, I hope this was worth it. I hope the ratings were worth your reputation. As Brad walked off set, George shouted after him. Don't you dare walk away from me. Brad stopped, turned one last time, and said, We're done, George. Completely done. The cameras kept rolling as security escorted him out. George stood frozen behind his desk, his career collapsing in real time, while the studio remained in stunned, echoing silence. And that's how one of Hollywood's biggest stars walked off Good Morning America after the most explosive interview in morning TV history. An on-air implosion that would be dissected, debated, and remembered for years to come.